Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Luffy ate the metal fruit, the movie. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I do not own this fanfic, and also make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, Zombie Raptor, and support him for writing this awesome fanfic. Link is in the description. Let's begin this story. Luffy grinned, as he reached the shore. Wow, we actually got here, he exclaimed excitedly. Well yeah, we just followed the map, Koby replied with a chuckle. After Luffy tied the boat to shore, he walked into town. The first thing we should do is get some meat, Luffy declared. After seeing the marine base up ahead, Luffy stopped. Hey, does anyone know anything about Zoro? Luffy called out. Everyone that could hear him quickly jumped back against whatever was behind them. Yes, see, trying to recruit this guy is a bad idea. He's nothing less than a monster, Koby tailed off, seeing that Luffy had stopped listening and gone on ahead. Anyways, I think the person in charge here is Lieutenant Morgan, Koby. Everyone on the street jumped back again. I get would they be scared of Zoro because he's an infamous pirate hunter, but why would they be afraid of Morgan because he's a marine, Koby thought out loud. Luffy shrugged as he walked into a shop. Hey, I thought we were going to the base first, since you already started asking questions, Koby said, running out. Yeah, I was about to, but I just remembered that I was hungry, Luffy replied. Koby's sweat dropped, but he figured, even though they hadn't known each other all that long, that this was to be expected with Luffy. After they finished eating, they started to head up to the marine base. Zoro is probably hidden in some dungeon under the base because he's so dangerous, Koby explained to Luffy. It was looking for him over the wall. Hey looks, he's right there, Luffy pointed out. Don't be ridiculous. It has to be someone else, so, I guess it's him, Koby responded, slightly confused as to why they would leave such an infamous person like Zoro out in the open. Koby looked over to see a little girl setting a ladder on the wall and climbing over. The little girl looked over and shushed him when Koby tried to protest. The girl hopped over the wall and ran over to Zoro. Hey wait, Koby called out. The little girl replied by shushing him. Luffy snickered. You're even getting pushed around by little girls. Koby merely hung his head in response, skipping over to when Morgan and the firing squad reached the bottom. No, I can't die here, Zoro cried out in his mind. As the shots fired, Luffy jumped down and spread his arms out, blocking the shots. Before anyone could comprehend exactly what happened, the bullets whirled around Luffy and back at the Marines. After recovering from the shock, Zoro, Koby, and the Marines' eyes all widened in shock. What are you? Zoro yelled. But me, I'm a metal man, Luffy replied with a big grin. I can make, absorb, and maniplant metal, Luffy explained. Do you mean manipulate? Koby asked, confused. Luffy paused for a few moments. Oh yeah, that's what I meant, he said, grinning. Luffy proceeded to try to untie Zoro's bonds. I got one undone, Luffy explained, and seemingly proud of himself. Zoro growled, just give me my swords, he yelled at Luffy. He then proceeded to hand Zoro's swords. Zoro quickly cut his own bonds and dashed past Luffy. Clashing with the Marines, Zoro blocked all 15 swords. Zoro pushed up and knocked all the Marines back, making them stumble. Okay Zoro, duck, Luffy called out, bringing his leg back. As Luffy's leg was swinging back, metal spread from his palm and down to his leg, seemingly just making an extension of his leg. Metal whip, Luffy called out, as he took out all the Marines that Zoro had pushed back in one kick. Zoro's eyes twitched while all the Marines cowered in fear. These people are monsters, one of the Marines called out. Morgan started growling. Anyone who spouted weakness, I order you to pull out your gun and kill yourself, he ordered. The Marines started shaking as they slowly pulled out their own guns and started to point them at themselves. Both Luffy and Zoro shook their heads. What a bunch of pathetic losers, Zoro muttered under his breath. Morgan started his charge toward Luffy and swung his axe. Did you not hear what my power was? Luffy asked as he stopped the axe with his hand. With a small grin from Luffy, Morgan's axe turned into a hook. Haha, now you're a pirate, Luffy laughed, and then turned around to deal with the other Marines who were stumbling in their attack because of the display. Luffy cocked his fist back. Metal, he paused, seeing that all the soldiers had dropped their weapons and ducked. Sparkles, Luffy yelled and started laughing. There wasn't much point in hurting them if they were that lame. Zoro saw Morgan starting to rush Luffy with his hook. Stepping in front of Morgan, Zoro charged him and took him down in a single sweep of his swords. All the Marines, who were still conscious, were gaping at Luffy and Zoro. Anyone else wanna keep fighting? Zoro asked with one sword leaned on his shoulder and the other two back in their sheath. The Marines started yelling and screaming in joy. That's a relief, they were all just afraid of Lieutenant Morgan, Koby said, relieved that all of the Marines weren't corrupt. Well, I'm hungry now, Luffy said, falling on his back. Hey, you're hungry? I haven't eaten in like a month, Zoro replied, annoyed. Yeah right, it hasn't been a month yet, plus you had that food the girl gave you today, Luffy responded, sticking his tongue out at Zoro afterwards. Zoro sighed. Well, I did say that I was going to be part of your crew, so whatever, I guess I am the one that chose this, Zoro laughed. Everyone in the town was treating Luffy and Zoro to food, drink, and pretty much whatever else they wanted. So you said you were in the middle of gathering your crew, Zoro mentioned. Well, you're the first person that I found, but we'll get more like a musician and a cook, Luffy said with a big grin on his face. Zoro sighed. At least tell me that you have a boat, he asked, hoping for a yes. Yeah, it's right there, Luffy responded by pointing out the window. Zoro looked out the window and groaned. Koby grinned. I think Luffy was born without that part of the brain that allows people to plan ahead, he answered. Of all the people I choose to be my captain, I pick him, but I guess there's nothing I can do about it now, Zoro sighed. As Luffy finally stopped eating, the door to the restaurant opened. You are pirates, correct? The Marine captain asked. Yup, Luffy replied shortly. As Marines we have to ask you to leave this island, the captain said. Once the words left his mouth everyone started yelling and complaining except Luffy, Zoro, and Koby. But out of respect for what you've done we won't report you to headquarters, the captain offered. Yup, we need to be leaving anyway, Luffy said, as he and Zoro got up and started heading to the door. Hey kid, are you with them? The captain asked Koby. Koby froze. He didn't know what to say. If the Marines knew that he was with pirates, then his chances of being a Marine dropped drastically. Oh him? Yeah, he's so pathetic. Luffy said he was on a ship with this big fatty continued. Koby started to shake. No Luffy, you can't do this, he screamed in his mind. Yeah, and all he did was clean what Luffy said before he was stopped. Everyone in the restaurant was surprised when Koby punched Luffy in the face. That was a big mistake, Luffy said right before he started pummeling Koby into the ground. Okay, that's enough, Zoro said, pulling Luffy away. Luffy tilted his hat down and left with Zoro. Well, obviously you guys aren't friends, so the captain started. Koby's eyes started to tear up. Even now he still needed Luffy's help. Please sir, let me join the Marines, Koby begged. Captain, he might be a pirate spy. Normally I wouldn't be worried about this, but it has happened in the past, one of the Marines said. The captain looked at Koby. Fine, you can join, he said with a small smile. You know you've got a good friend there, the captain added, glancing down at Koby. Yeah, Koby replied, as he sniffled. Luffy and Zoro had set sail. Looking back they saw everyone waving goodbye to them, and the Marines saluting them. How what an odd thing for Marines to do, saluting pirates, Zoro commented. They also probably saw through your act, it wasn't all that good, Zoro added. Luffy laughed. Koby can figure it out from here on out, I have faith in him. Luffy and Zoro were laying in their boat, bored out of their minds, and starving. They hadn't thought all that far ahead about bringing food. Hey look, a bird, Luffy yelled. It's dinner time, I'll catch it, he declared, launching himself up at the bird. Zoro faceopened after seeing Luffy get caught in the bird's mouth. Luffy made sure to note that the next time he is going after a bird, use his powers to bring it down to him, not go up to it. Zoro took the paddles and started rowing after the bird. Stupid, dumbness of a captain, he muttered to himself as he chased the bird. As he was rowing he saw pirates crying out for his help. If you want to get on, you're going to have to climb on while I'm moving, Zoro called out. Wow, you guys are pretty good at climbing, Zoro commented, seeing that all of them made it on board. Now we the Buggy pirates are commandeering your ship, one of the pirates declared. After a few seconds, and many bumps and bruises, the pirates were rowing well. Zoro leaned back. We are very sorry, we didn't realize that you were the famous pirate hunter Arlong, Zoro, the middle pirate said quickly. Just row, you made me lose sight of my friend, Zoro said angrily. The Buggy pirates quickly started rowing faster in fear of another sound beating. Nami was running as fast as she could. She liked her living self much more than her debtor slave one. Honestly, I only took one little map, Nami yelled out to the pirates chasing her. Seeing as she wasn't going to dissuade them, Nami was about to run through a house to try and lose them, but stopped after a man crashed to the ground in front of her. Both Nami and the chasers stopped. What the hell, you're alright, Nami yelled, seeing the man get up. Luffy looked up at Nami. Oh hey there, I'm Luffy, he introduced me with a smile. Nami was about to yell again when an idea popped into her head. Oh come on boss, we already know each other, but you can take care of those pricks over there for me, Nami said, as she ran away. So you're that girl's boss, one of the pirates stated. Wait, what? Luffy asked, confused. The girl had called him boss, and they thought he was her boss, so that made her his. No, that's not right, I would still have to invite her to my crew, Luffy said, thinking out loud. Seeing as Luffy wasn't too smart, the pirates merely growled and charged Luffy with their swords. Luffy sent out a tiger from his hand. The pirates stopped seeing the tiger. The pirate in the middle stepped forward. Hey come on guys, it's not like it's a real tiger, I mean look, it's made out of metal, he said. The other two pirates nodded and started running at Luffy again. With a small grin from Luffy, the tiger slashed at their weapons, absorbing them, then pounced on the first pirate, knocking him out. Turning around, Luffy's tiger swiped at the second pirate's head, sending him flying. The third pirate had simply disappeared. That's my tiger puppet, Luffy laughed, as he pulled the tiger back into his palm through the small length of metal that attached the tiger to his palm. Nami stared in amazement. That kid beat the Buggy pirates, and barely moved to do so. Nami jumped down next to Luffy. Hey, thanks for the help, Nami said with a smile. No problem, Luffy replied with a big grin. Hey, you have any food, Luffy asked. Yeah, follow me, Nami responded. Nami led Luffy into one of the houses on the street. After watching Luffy eat for a bit, Nami decided that she wanted some answers from Freak Boy. So what are you doing here, and how did you survive that fall, and what was with that tiger, she asked, raising her voice with each question. "Oh, I'm a metal man," Luffy answered, and put his palm out, forming a small whirlpool of gold. Nami's eyes lit up. "Luffy, is that gold?" she asked, barely able to keep her voice. "Yeah, but I don't make money out of it. That takes all the fun out of being a pirate," Luffy explained. "Oh, and my grandpa went on about something with it being bad for the economy or something like that," he added. "Oh, you're a pirate, are you?" Nami asked. Luffy nodded in response. "Well, I hate pirates," she replied, and turned away. After a few seconds, Nami's eyes drifted back to the gold that was starting to disappear into Luffy's palm. "So you're a thief then?" Luffy asked. Nami looked over, slightly surprised. "Hey, don't treat me like any common thief. I only steal from pirates, and I'm also the best navigator that you're likely to meet," she replied angrily. It was Luffy's eyes that lit up this time. "You're a navigator, you should join my crew," he offered excitedly. Luffy started grinning and giggling. "Okay, so I don't know where my boat is, but we can wait since the other guy in my crew is still on it, and he'll find us, and we can leave soon," he told Nami. "Wait, I already told you I don't like pirates, and you can't just make me part of your crew," Nami complained. "Well, I decided you're my navigator," Luffy declared stubbornly. Nami simply sighed in response, before another idea came into her head. "Hey Luffy, I'll join your crew, but first you need to do me a favor," Nami said, grinning deviously in her mind. Luffy's face brightened. "Sure, what do you need?" he asked quickly. Within a few seconds, Nami had Luffy's arms tied to his body. "Just stay like this for a bit," Nami told Luffy, who quickly nodded in response. "Hey, perfect, this will take out one pirate, and I can steal Buggy's treasure while I'm at it." Nami and Luffy reached Buggy's camp. "Look boss, there's that girl that stole the map," a crew member said, pointing at Nami. "Hey, I thought we could come to an agreement," Nami explained. "Oh really now, and what do you have to offer?" Buggy asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Well, I got really sick of my boss, so I thought I'd bring him and the map here, so I could join your crew." Nami replied, "I'm also a really good navigator," she added. Buggy chuckled a few times. "I like you," he declared. "Everyone, welcome our new navigator, and let's party," he yelled. Luffy on the other hand had been put in a metal cage. Luffy started drooling as more food came out. Quickly getting tired of seeing food and not being able to eat it, Luffy quickly cut his bonds. Grabbing the iron cage, Luffy quickly sucked the bars into his palm. Luffy happily ran over to the food and started shoveling it into his mouth. A few minutes passed, and a lot of the pirates had started to cheer Luffy on. Luffy was on his 8th table of food when Captain Buggy made his appearance. "Okay Nami, I think it's time to blow your old boss away with a boogie ball, and since you gave him to us, I'll give you the pleasure," Buggy said with a grin. Seeing as Nami didn't have anything to light it with, one of the pirates tossed her a box of matches. After a few seconds, Nami stopped. "If I just go and kill someone like this, how does it make me any different than a pirate?" she asked herself. Both Nami and Buggy looked over to see Luffy, and their jaws dropped. "Where the hell did he go?" Buggy yelled. Looking around his camp, Buggy's eyes fell on Luffy. "You were the only one still standing at the table and eating." "Hey Straw Hat, what are you doing out of your cage?" Buggy yelled. "Eating?" Luffy replied with a blank look on his face. "I can see that. I mean, how did you get out of your cage?" Buggy yelled. "You sure do yell a lot, don't you?" Luffy pointed out. Buggy growled and shot him with the boogie ball he ordered to the soldiers who had set the cannon up. The soldiers shot the cannon at Luffy, who merely stepped to the side and let the boogie ball go into the ocean. "Hey Luffy, already getting into trouble?" Zoro asked, coming from behind. "Oh hey Zoro, you're here. That's our new navigator," Luffy said, pointing to Nami. "Hey, I never agreed to that. I don't even know you," Nami yelled out. Buggy turned around to face Nami. "Well, you don't know him. That means you were lying to us, which means you can't be trusted, doesn't it?" Buggy said, glaring at Nami. Nami chuckled nervously a few times before running to Luffy and Zoro. "How about we join forces just for a while? I'm not becoming a pirate, though," Nami offered. Luffy smiled and nodded. Zoro shrugged. "It really doesn't matter to me. He's the captain, so I just go with whatever he says." Nami sighed in relief. Hanging with these guys for a bit sounded a lot better than anything that the Buggy pirates would do to her. To Nami, Luffy was a bit stupid, but at least he seemed to be nice. Buggy had his crew load up another boogie ball, while Luffy, Nami, and Zoro were talking. Luffy glanced over at Buggy, who was now laughing like a maniac, and let a small stream of metal flow from his palm. As soon as the metal connected to the cannon, Luffy twisted the cannon's barrel, causing Buggy pirates' eyes to widen in fear. Luffy and Zoro started laughing uncontrollably at the Buggy pirates who were trying to put the fuse out. "What kind of freak are you?" Nami yelled at Luffy. Zoro glared at Nami. "Hey, I'm a freak too, don't forget about me," he joked. Luffy giggled and hopped off the building. Nami and Zoro quickly followed. Luffy grinned and looked back. "You guys might want to get on this side of me," he suggested. Both Nami and Zoro sprinted as fast as they could, not knowing what Luffy was about to do since he was, in both of their opinions, certifiable. Luffy smiled as he let steel pour from his palms. Nami looked down and saw the ground in front of him being coated in metal. Metal catapult," Luffy said, yelling the last part. Both Nami and Zoro watched in amazement as the entire crumbled building was flung with ease across what looked to be several miles. Luffy grinned. "We have a navigator," he yelled at Zoro. Zoro looked at Nami and chuckled. You're not getting out of this one. I'm pretty sure you're the only navigator that Luffy will accept now, he explained. Nami merely responded with a groan. Luffy walked towards Arlong Park with a glare that would send most people running. Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp followed in his trail with similar looks, though not quite as fierce. As Arlong Park came into view, the villagers at the gate turned and saw the Straw Hats marching towards him. Johnny and Yusaku smiled. Those are the people that are gonna fight Arlong, they told the villagers. Why do you have to fight Arlong? Genzo asked, still staring at the pirates. Because Nami's their friend. What more reason do they need? Johnny replied calmly. The crowd split apart as the Straw Hats closed in. Luffy stepped towards the gate and glared at it, spreading his legs slightly, stepping into stance. Luffy punched the gate once, causing an indent. Luffy punched the gate 2 more times, causing it to burst open. The villagers all gasped in surprise. Someone that strong might even be able to take Arlong down. Luffy stepped into where the gate used to be. Arlong. Everyone, including Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro, were forced back a step by the intensity of the shout. Luffy, however, stepped through what used to be the gate and started heading straight for Arlong. A few fishermen who had recovered quicker than everyone else stepped in front of Luffy. You don't get to see Arlong before you go through. He started before being cut off by his partner's head bashing into his own. Luffy proceeded to walk forward to Arlong. Arlong chuckled. So pirate, what do you want with me? He asked with a grin. Luffy replied with a roar and punched Arlong in the face. Arlong went flying and bashed through the stone wall of Arlong Park and into the ocean. Everyone, not counting Luffy's crew, gasped. Arlong was sent flying with a single punch. Climbing out of the ocean, Arlong growled. Arlong, we'll take care of these guys. If you go on a rampage, you'll destroy all of Arlong Park, Chu said, stepping in front of Arlong. Let us handle these guys, Sanji said. Yeah, you handle the rabble, and you can come back and take Arlong down if he decides to start fighting, Zoro added with a smile. Skipping to Luffy's other fights ended in a similar fashion. Arlong had finally intervened after seeing his men beaten by Zoro and Sanji. Of course, Usopp came back and started bragging about beating Chu, which brought Arlong's attention towards him. Luffy, however, stepped in before Arlong could hurt any of his crew. The opponent is me, Luffy said, jumping in front of Arlong. Arlong made the first move and divided after Luffy, who quickly dodged. Luffy responded with a punch to Arlong's gut, quickly followed by a blow to his jaw. Arlong growled as he got up. Luffy charged in, going for another punch. Arlong grinned and caught Luffy's punch in his teeth. Luffy yelled out in pain. Sanji winced and Zoro grimaced. I know his powers well enough to know that the points where Arlong bit him should be covered in metal, Zoro explained. Sanji's eyes widened. That means if Luffy or Arlong pulls away, then Luffy's arm will be ripped off, he said, more to himself than to Zoro. Zoro chuckled. Unfortunately, I don't think our captain really cares about that all that much. He's too much of an idiot, he explained. Luffy picked Arlong up and slammed him into the ground. Luffy sighed with relief. Man, that really hurt, said, looking at his arm. The metal plating that had covered where he was bitten was punctured by Arlong's teeth. See, that is the inherent superiority of fisherman. Arlong started before being cut off. Yes, see, you say that, but you also just got slammed into the ground by me, so you know that. Luffy started pointing at the indent in the ground. Growling, Arlong jumped into the water. Hey, that's cheating, I can't follow you there, Luffy yelled at Arlong. Luffy gets out of there, Sanji yelled, realizing what Arlong was doing. Luffy looked down and saw Arlong coming towards him. Luffy quickly jumped out of the way, avoiding Arlong. Luffy, go hide, he's back in the water, Usopp and Sanji yelled together. No, Luffy replied calmly. Arlong smiled, seeing that Luffy wasn't moving. Maybe he's just given up hope, Arlong said to himself as he started charging. Luffy stood his ground as he watched the shadow of Arlong grow closer. Luffy quickly punched his hands together, catching Arlong by the base of his nose. Everyone gasped as Arlong and Luffy shot up through multiple floors of Arlong Park. Nami, who had come running in when Sanji and Zoro were fighting, looked up to see that the dust was settling on the top floor. Nami's eyes widened as she saw that they were in the room Arlong gave her. Arlong was surprised, to say the least. This human, who should be an insignificant speck of strength compared to him, stopped his charge with his bare hands. Where are we? Luffy asked, looking around. Arlong chuckled. This is Nami's room. This is the room where she draws all the sea charts for us, and Arlong explained. Luffy looked to the side, seeing a pen covered in blood, and turned to Arlong. Luffy sat there quietly. As he studied the pen, he understood what he had to do. Luffy stood there for a few more seconds before holding out his hand. Using his powers, Luffy blew out a large portion of the wall, scattering the sea charts and furniture. Arlong's eyes widened. What are you doing? He cried out. Luffy proceeded to wreak havoc on everything around him. That was a year's worth of work and ambition, Arlong screamed angrily. Having had enough of Arlong started to charge Luffy. Luffy gasped as Arlong started spinning. Wow, that's so cool, and coming at me, he finished tailing off. Luffy used both hands and shot a bar of steel towards the ceiling. The steel flowered out and started spiraling. Luffy knew this alone wasn't going to bring down all of Arlong Park. Even more metal started branching out from the spinning metal and falling into a point at the base. Luffy ended up looking like a giant whirlwind of steel. Everyone outside started to yell and run away as Arlong Park started to crumble in a whirlwind. Nami simply stood there with her hand over her mouth, on the verge of crying. "Nami, we have to get away from there," Usopp yelled, pulling at her sleeve. "But Luffy," she responded, pointing towards the building. "There's nothing that you can do right now. We have to get out of here before we die," Usopp told her, as he started to pull harder. Nami gave in and followed Usopp. He was right, she couldn't do anything at the moment. The entire village from a safe distance stared at the former Arlong Park in amazement and anticipation. Everyone kept looking at the rubble that used to be Arlong Park. Someone had surely been beaten, but all anyone saw before Luffy and Arlong went into the building was Arlong hitting Luffy. After the dust had settled, Luffy rose from the broken building. The tears that had been welling up in Nami's eyes finally started to fall freely. Luffy gave a wide smile and a wave signaling that he was fine. Nami dropped her staff and started running towards Luffy. Nami tackled Luffy with a hug, nearly knocking him down. "So I'm still part of your crew, right?" Nami asked, already knowing the answer. "You're my navigator," Luffy declared, leaving no room for arguments. Nami had no doubt he wouldn't have left this island without her being his navigator. Luffy huffed. He was bleeding, but since he set out from Arlong Park, he found the thin layer of metal that would usually protect his skin was useless among stronger enemies, unless they happened to be using metal weapons. Crocodile grinned, having seemed to regain his confidence since he hit Luffy. "Give it up, Straw Hat. Scorpion poison is flowing through your body now. Even if you beat me, you still die," he told Luffy. The poison had slipped in through a wound, even so Crocodile never actually scratched him with his hook. Robin and Koby stared at Luffy in amazement. It had been at least a few minutes since he had been poisoned, and that poison was not something that you just get up and walk away from. Crocodile growled as he bit, as he saw that Luffy hadn't yet fallen. Luffy looked up slowly, his eyes shadowed by his hat. Luffy rushed forward and slammed his fist into Crocodile's stomach. Crocodile's eyes widened as he was set flying off of his feet. "He should be dead on the ground by now," Crocodile growled while pushing himself up from the ground. "Skewered, dried up, and poisoned, yet you still fight me," he said through his teeth between anger and frustration. Luffy met Crocodile's gaze. "Vivi, she always tells people not to risk their lives, but she's always the first one to lay hers on the line," Luffy replied. "Vivi's our friend, and, as long as she keeps fighting, so will we," he yelled, and rushed forward at a speed to which Crocodile couldn't react. Koby's eyes widened as Luffy sent Crocodile flying towards the ceiling. Luffy shot upwards using his powers to create springs at his feet that shot him upwards. As Luffy reached Crocodile, he started pounding him through the ceiling. Koby gaped as he lost sight of Luffy and the now unconscious Crocodile. "He's driving him straight through the bedrock," the king muttered to himself. Luffy eventually broke through to the surface and sent Crocodile flying into the air. Luffy gave a small grin before he fell back down through the hole. Using his powers, Luffy slowed himself before he hit the ground by creating a cylinder of liquid metal, in which he fell through that effectively stopped him. After reaching the ground, Luffy stumbled over to Robin and Koby. Picking both of them up, Luffy put Koby over his shoulder and Robin under his arm. "Hey! Stop it," Robin cried out. "Just leave me, and let me die down here," she told him, as she struggled under his arm. After taking them out of the ruins, Luffy set them down lightly, and promptly collapsed from a mix of the poison, injuries, and exhaustion. Koby gaped. Luffy had carried them all the way out after having fought Crocodile. Koby quickly hurried over to Luffy. "Move away," Robin told him. Koby looked confused as to why she would want him to leave Luffy. As Robin moved closer, he noticed a small vial. Looking over, Robin gave a small smile. "It's an antidote," she explained. The Straw Hat crew laid scattered on a street. They were exhausted. Koby smiled. These were the people that saved Alabasta. They certainly didn't look like much. The crew looked over at Koby and saw Luffy on his shoulders. "We're grateful and all, but who are you?" Nami asked, as the rest of the crew were grinning after seeing Luffy. "He was poisoned, but it's been taken care of," Koby explained. The Straw Hats all sighed in relief. "Daddy, Daddy," yelled a voice from down the street. Everyone looked over to see Vivi running towards him. "Daddy," Sanji mumbled to himself, as he looked towards Vivi, then Koby. "Wait, that means you're the king," Sanji yelled. Koby chuckled. "Yes, but you saved this country, and, as far as I know, my daughter," and the king replied with a grin. The Straw Hats sighed as they sailed away. The entire crew, excluding Zoro, was pouting since Vivi wasn't on board anymore. Zoro shrugged away the lame insults that were thrown at him. It's not like they hadn't seen this coming. Everyone was quiet as they stared at something else. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Nami yelled. Robin smiled. "I want to join your crew," she told them. "What, everyone except for Luffy?" and Sanji yelled. "I didn't want to live anymore, and Luffy saved me, so I have nowhere else to go," she replied. Sanji was obviously busy in his love days, as he pranced around crying out something about Robin's beauty. "Why would we let you join our crew? You were helping Crocodile try to destroy this country," Nami asked suspiciously. "Oh, I have this bag of gold and jewelry," but Robin stopped, as Nami quickly snatched the bag. Zoro crossed his arms and glared at Robin. "Just because they fell for you doesn't mean we will," Usopp declared, and Chopper quickly agreed. Robin made hands appear and started playing with Usopp and Chopper. Zoro sighed. "It's your call, Luffy," he said. "She's not a bad person," Luffy said, as he gave a wide grin. "It's time to go to the next island," Luffy told everyone. Robin smiled, and Zoro glared. "Just because you're part of the crew doesn't mean I trust you," Zoro told her. Zoro stops as Luffy told him in a whiny voice. "I told you she was a good person, otherwise I wouldn't have saved her," he explained. Shooting metal from his hands, Luffy grabbed Robin and pulled her onto the second floor of the Mary, much to her surprise. Zoro glared. "Hey, how come you just set her down? I always get flinged off somewhere," he yelled at Luffy. "We're on the ship, there's nowhere to fling her to," Luffy told him with a blank look on his face. Zoro rolled his eyes and laid down to sleep. "So what can you do?" Luffy asked excitedly, as he crossed his legs and sat down in front of Robin. Robin giggled a little and sat down next to him. "Well, I'm an archaeologist, and, as you know, I have devil fruit powers, so I can make body parts appear wherever," she tells him with a smile. "I'd also like to thank you for saving me," she said. Luffy laughed. "I heard from Vivi's dad that I should be thanking you for saving me from the poison," he replied. "Yes, but I couldn't have saved you if you hadn't saved me, and I lost my will to live before," Robin responded. "Well, I guess we're even then," Luffy said before he started laughing. As Luffy left, Robin studied him. Unlike a lot of people, Luffy wasn't one to rely on his devil fruit for a source of power. He would fight all the same people he had already fought, regardless of whether he had the powers or not. That fact, combined with the fact that he had a devil during power, made him a very hard person to kill. The devil fruit powers merely allowed him to fight at a much higher level than a 17-year-old should be able to. The more she thought about him, the more he confused her. Why had he saved her when there was every reason not to? Nami looked over, seeing Robin sitting down and looking at Luffy. "You know, Luffy's a good judge of character, so if he trusts you then so do I," she told Robin. "He must be a good captain," Robin commented, looking over at Nami since Luffy had gone inside. "Well, I wouldn't exactly call him a good captain, but he's a good friend even if he is a bit airheaded," Nami explained. "He should be dead," Robin stated. "He was poisoned, and because of how hard he was working, the poison should have pumped through his body even faster and killed him even faster," she explained, seeing Nami's confused but not all that surprised look. "That's Luffy for you. I honestly think if you want to beat him while his friends are on the line, you're going to be pretty disappointed. You could cut off his head, and he'd probably keep fighting just from pure willpower," Nami told Robin. "He said he was doing all of that for a friend, and he didn't seem to care what happened to himself, as long as he helped her," Robin replied. Luffy came into view of Robin and Nami as he was thrown out of the kitchen by Sanji. "Sanji, I'm hungry," Luffy whined. "I don't care, you already ate. We'll run out of food if you continue at this rate," Sanji yelled from inside the kitchen. Luffy pouted and walked out and sat on his seat. Nami walked into the kitchen where the rest of the crew was, as Robin walked over to Luffy. "Are we friends?" Robin asked. Luffy looked over with a confused look on his face. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Well, I helped start a civil war in your friend's country, so wouldn't that make me your enemy?" Robin explained. "Yeah, but I can tell you're a good person, so I'm sure you had your reasons, so I forgive you. Plus you saved my life, so yeah," Luffy replied with a grin. Robin looked ahead and leaned against the railing. "Hey Luffy, mind if I join you there?" Robin asked. Luffy looked back at Robin. "You're new on the ship, so I guess you didn't know, but this is my seat," he told her. "Yes, but I wouldn't be taking it. I would just be sitting next to you on it," Robin explained. "But there's not enough room," Luffy told her. "I could sit on your lap," she suggested. That would be weird though," he replied. Robin giggled. "I guess it was," she said. "How about we go inside and get a snack?" she suggested. Luffy's shoulders slumped. "Sanji said that he wasn't going to make me any food, yet he complained in a whiny voice. Do you think I could convince him?" Robin asked. She knew Sanji was a great cook and a great fighter, but she found him a bit pathetic. Luffy beamed at her. "Yeah, Sanji can't help but give in to pretty women," he told her excitedly. "Oh, you think I'm pretty?" Robin asked, trying to embarrass him or cause him to become flustered. Luffy nodded quickly and grabbed her by her sleeve and dragged her towards the kitchen. As they entered the kitchen, Robin found herself surprised. She knew she was pretty, and she could generally use that to her advantage against men. Luffy, on the other hand, seemed to hold no such thoughts like that towards her though. "Cook-san, can you make me some food?" Robin asked. Sanji's eyes popped out and turned into hearts. "I'll do anything for you, Robin chwan," Sanji yelled as he quickly started cooking food. "That looks like a good cook-san, but can you make some bigger ones as well?" Robin asked. Sanji didn't even respond as he started to prepare something else as well. Robin thanked Sanji and left with the food. Luffy, who had quickly been pushed out of the kitchen and lectured on how it was rude to drag a woman, let his tongue hang out as soon as he saw the food. Thank you, Robin," he said quickly. "You're going to be a great member of the crew," he added, happily eating away at the food. "You should eat. Sanji's a really good cook," Luffy said, holding Robin's plate up to her face. Robin giggled as she took the plate. She had a feeling she was going to like being part of the Going Merry's crew. This thought caused her to frown a bit. Robin found herself drifting towards Luffy since they had gotten in the sun. She held no misconceptions of why she found herself drawn to Luffy. He has saved her and made her want to live, and she also happened to quite like his personality. Luffy on the other hand was still slightly upset that Robin had been taken from him, even if it was her choice, and he got her back. He felt himself start to get slightly paranoid, which was totally unlike him, and he didn't particularly like it. Walking towards Robin, Luffy thought about what he was going to do. After all, it would be weird if he just went over and stared at her. Robin looked over and saw Luffy walking towards her. As Luffy came within arm's reach of her, she felt something from over her wrist. Luffy, Nami yelled, storming over to them. "Why are you handcuffing Robin?" she asked angrily. Luffy looked down at Robin's wrist and saw that it was cuffed to his own. Luffy looked at Nami and shrugged. Seeing Nami fuming, Robin started to giggle. "It's okay, Nami, it just means he's worried about me," she told Nami. "Yeah, this is just to make sure that she doesn't get taken away, cause then they have to fight me," Luffy added. Nami stared at Luffy for a few seconds before coming to a realization. "You didn't even know what you were doing, did you?" she asked, raising her hand to her forehead. Luffy shook his head, drawing a giggle from Robin and a sigh from Nami. "Don't worry, if it starts to bother me I'll tell him to take it off," Robin said with a smile. Nami eventually walked away after Robin assured her that she didn't mind being handcuffed to her captain. Robin smiled to herself, she really didn't mind all that much. In fact, the more she thought about it, the safer she felt. Being connected to Luffy like this actually brought her a large degree of comfort. As long as she was connected to him, he would never let anything happen to her. As Nami was accepting of Luffy handcuffing Robin to himself, Robin knew it would be a little weird explaining it to the rest of the crew, and what was Luffy planning once they had to go to bed. "Come on Luffy, why don't we go get some food?" Robin suggested. It was about lunchtime, and everyone had disappeared, so she assumed Sanji had at least started cooking, and everyone was just waiting in the kitchen. Luffy paused, which Robin found odd seeing, as they were talking about food. "What are we supposed to do at night?" Luffy asked. Robin gave him an odd glance. It wasn't like him to think about these things ahead of time. "I don't want to drag you around while I'm trying to get food at night," he told her. Robin giggled, she should have seen that coming. "What about sleeping arrangements?" Robin asked. Luffy stared at her with a blank look on his. "Where are you going to sleep, and where am I going to sleep?" Robin clarified. In bed, came the simple reply. Robin raised an eyebrow and tapped the metal on her wrist. After a few seconds, a look of realization dawned on Luffy's face. "Ah, don't worry, I can create a barrier in the bed if you want me to," he answered, waving it off. It's not like it really bothered her, though she should have guessed that type of thing didn't really bother Luffy at all either. "Anyways, let's go get food," he said excitedly while tugging at Robin's wrist. Robin smiled as she was pulled along by Luffy. She wasn't being dragged, in fact Luffy was actually walking to lunch. As they entered the kitchen, they were greeted by a few odd looks due to the fact that Luffy wasn't sprinting in for food. "Robin, maybe you guys should stay like that for a while. Luffy might learn some manners," Nami jokes. "That's a good point, Nami," Robin replied, hinting at the fact that she would actually like to stay connected to him. Zoro looked and gave a slight grin. "That's an interesting thing you got going there. Looks a bit kinky, but you know I'm not one to judge," he said, pointing to the chain. Robin started to blush at the implications of Zoro's statement, while Luffy just sat there unaware of what he was talking about. "What are you doing to my Robin?" Chwan, Sanji yelled, as he started to run after Luffy. Robin sprouted a few arms out of the floor and tripped Sanji. "Thank you, Cook-san, for caring, but I do not wish to be thrown around," Robin told him, seeing his clear intent to kick Luffy out of the door and off the boat. "Well, let me at least break the chain," Sanji said, straightening his clothes out. Sanji put the chain on top of the barrel and prepared to break it with his foot. Robin, who was perfectly fine with her current arrangement, wasn't worrying all that much. If Sanji managed to break the chain, she had no doubt Luffy would have it fixed almost immediately. That was if he was able to break the chain. Luffy, on the other hand, was giggling. As Sanji brought down his foot, the barrel below the chain collapsed. Sanji muttered something under his breath about the stupid chains. "Luffy," he yelled. Luffy scooted over just out of Sanji's kick range. "Take the chain off my Robin Chwan," he told Luffy. Robin stepped in front of Luffy. "I am perfectly fine with this arrangement, and I am not yours," she told Sanji with a glare. Sanji went and started crying in the corner, much to Zoro's amusement. As Luffy started to eat lunch, Robin sat there eating her own as she watched him. Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper had forgotten about Robin, and Luffy had dismissed it as Luffy being weird. Sanji was still bowing in the corner. Zoro, who never really butted in unnecessarily very often, was busy mocking Sanji. Nami, on the other hand, was watching Robin watch Luffy. "Luffy, can I talk to Robin for a moment?" Nami asked. Luffy, having finished his food, nodded and walked away. The chain connecting Robin and Luffy grew longer until he stopped by Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper. Seeing as Luffy was intently listening to a story that Usopp was telling, Nami turned to Robin. "So how long were you planning on staying connected to him?" she asked with a smile. Robin looked down towards the table. "I don't know, until we got into a serious fight, I guess," she replied, knowing it would be senseless to hide information from the navigator. Though to Robin this was also a good way to get some advice for Luffy. Navigator-san, do you think Luffy could like me? Robin asked. Nami grinned at Luffy like all of his. Though if you're talking about some deeper feelings, then maybe. I don't really know since it's Luffy. He's a mystery, she explained. But, I can understand how you feel, or at least somewhat, Nami added. Robin sighed, and looked up at Nami miserably. But I wanted him to, so she paused for a moment to see if anyone else was listening. I want him to love me, she said quietly. Robin, I can't claim to know how Luffy thinks, but you were important to him. I mean, he saved my village, and my sister, and I practically fell in love with him, Nami told Robin with a smile. Seeing the look of worry in Robin's eyes, Nami grinned. Don't worry, well, Luffy wouldn't be my last choice. He's like my annoying little brother, she reassured Robin. But he gave you everything, Nami told her. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had no family, friends, and you had all but given up on your dreams, Nami said. Robin shifted uncomfortably. Everything Nami said was true, but she didn't like being reminded of it. He challenged the entire world for you. You'd be mad too, not love him at least to a certain degree, she finished. Robin groaned. I don't need you making me even more desperate for his affections, she told Nami. Besides, the rest of you were standing right there with him when he had Usopp burn the flag, she added. Yes, but Luffy is Nami, and Luffy is what makes us who we are. Most likely if we hadn't met Luffy, Zoro would still be a bounty hunter. I'd still be a thief under Arlong's ruler dead. Usopp would probably be dead. Sanji would still be working as a cook at the Barati. Chopper would still be an outcast. Frankie probably still be tearing apart ships. And you would, if I'm not mistaken, be dead by Crocodile's hand. My point is, Luffy is this crew, and we wouldn't be the people who would stand up for you like that without him, Nami finished. I thought I told you I don't need to be made more desperate, Robin replied with a sigh. You could try something with your sleeping arrangements tonight, Nami suggested with a wink. With that, Nami got up and left a blushing Robin at the table. Robin gave a small tug on the chain to let Luffy know she was done talking to Nami. Luffy came bounding over to Robin. What did you talk about? He asked immediately. Robin gave a small smile and shook her head, indicating she wasn't going to tell him. Did you want to go outside for a bit though, she asked. Sure, what did you want to do? You normally just sit and read, Luffy replied. Well, I was thinking we could sit together, maybe talk a bit, she told him with a smile. Luffy put his finger on his chin before nodding eagerly. Luffy wasn't exactly sure as to why he agreed so eagerly, but he knew he didn't mind being close to Robin. Nami looked at Robin and Luffy. Luffy was a bit airheaded, but she figured that Robin was smart enough for both of them. Robin on the other hand liked Luffy's own mental capabilities. Sure, he might not be smart in the way that she was, but there was no one else she had ever met that knew how to help other people like he did. He always seemed to know exactly what to say or do to help his friends and the people around him. Robin pulled Luffy over to the railing and sat down, letting her legs hang off the ship. You know, Luffy, I don't think many people on the ship really ever wanted to be pirates, Robin commented. Ha, Luffy replied, staring at her blankly. Well, I for one never wanted to be a pirate. I've always just wanted to be an archaeologist, Robin explained. Well, I guess that Zoro was a bounty hunter and didn't want to be a pirate, and Nami hated pirates before joining me. Sanji just wanted to cook and impress that guy with no leg and a big hat, and to find the all blue. I wouldn't say Frankie didn't want to be a pirate, but he had his whole thing with all the stuff, and Chopper just wanted to be a doctor and have some friends, Luffy said, explaining his thinking behind everyone on the crew. What about Usopp? Robin asked. Oh well, he wanted to be a pirate since his father was, Luffy replied with a grin. Robin leaned her head onto Luffy's shoulder, causing him to blush. You don't mind if I rest here for a bit, she asked, tilting her head up a bit to look at Luffy. Luffy quickly shook his head. Robin smiled and snuggled up a bit closer to Luffy. At this point, Luffy's face was completely red. He never really felt this way about someone else. Nami watched Luffy and Robin from the lawn chair that she had settled in. Robin was obviously trying to get Luffy's attention, and it seemed to be working. While Nami couldn't see Luffy's face, she could tell he was quite flustered by how rigid he was. Luffy felt a bit uncomfortable. It wasn't that he didn't like how Robin leaned against him. The longer he thought about it, the more he was starting to itch for a fight. In a fight he could have fun, and not have to think about all the things like how Robin was leaned up against him. Luffy, you should relax, Robin told him. Robin smiled inwardly, as she felt how uncomfortable he was. Add that to the red in his face, and she knew she was affecting her carefree captain. Yes, she liked that thought, her captain. Luffy, Nami called out. Luffy turned around, relieved that he could get away from Robin. He would have to figure out what he was feeling later on. Robin looked up at him and smiled. Luffy hurried over to Nami. So Luffy, how do you feel about Robin, Nami? Luffy started to run away when Nami grabbed his ear. Unfortunately for Nami, before she could grab his ear, he covered the side of his head in metal, and was easily able to move Nami's hand away with his powers. Robin felt herself start to be dragged from her spot. Luffy, can you stop? Robin calling out once she managed to get on her feet. Luffy stopped running and turned around. Luffy looked at Robin, then to her wrist, and then towards his wrist. Oh sorry, I forgot about this, he chuckled nervously, pointing to the chain. Robin sighed. She had expected to be dragged around like a doll at some point, though since they stayed on the ship it hadn't been too bad. After bringing Luffy back outside, Nami grinned. Now Luffy, go back and talk to Nami, Robin told him. Robin had heard what Nami asked Luffy, and she wanted to know the answer. Luffy hung his head and nodded. Nami grinned again as she saw Luffy walking towards her. So Luffy, are you going to answer my question? Nami asked. Luffy shrugged. Nami stared blankly at him. What do you mean you don't know if you can answer my question? Nami asked, starting to get annoyed with Luffy. No, I meant I don't know how I feel about her, Luffy quickly clarified fearfully. Robin frowned. Had Luffy not even put that much thought into her? Nami looked at Luffy carefully, and soon came to the realization that Luffy was confused. What do you mean you don't know how you feel? Nami asked. Well, I feel uncomfortable around her, but I still like being around her, and I don't even know why I put the chain around her wrist, Luffy replied. Nami smiled. What would she do if she kissed you? She asked. Luffy's face turned bright red. Nami grinned, and that answered her question. Luffy never blushed, and told her that Luffy at least had a higher level of affection towards Robin than anyone else. What would you do if I kissed you? Nami repeated. Luffy replied, looking at her like she was crazy. Nami sighed. She found his reaction slightly offensive, but then again it was Luffy. Robin smiled. It was good to know that she was the only one around that could make him so flustered. Luffy was sent away by Nami, and returned to Robin's side. So Luffy, what did you guys talk about? Robin asked. What? Nothing, Luffy stuttered. So you just sat there, and moved your mouth? Robin asked. Robin smiled, as Luffy started to turn red. It made her happy that she could do that. I've got to watch tonight, Zoro called out to everyone. Everyone sighed. Zoro keeping watch basically meant that whoever wakes up first in an emergency was the one to wake everyone else up. And the first person to wake up was definitely not Zoro. Robin tugged at the chain. Come on Luffy, let's go to bed, she said, pulling Luffy along. Once they got to Luffy's room, Luffy jumped on his bed. Luffy's bed had a trampoline built in specifically so he could jump on it, not that there was much room to. Luffy, why don't you make the chain shorter so it doesn't get in the way, Robin suggested. Luffy responded with a nod. Once the chain was shortened, Robin slipped into the bed and snuggled up against Luffy, causing him to stop breathing. You don't mind, do you, Luffy? Robin asked. Without a response, Robin snuggled up closer. I'll take the silence as a sign that you don't mind, she declared. After only a few minutes, Robin found herself falling asleep. Luffy soon followed, although that part was no surprise. Robin woke up to find herself sleeping with her captain. She smiled as she remembered what happened. She had slipped into the bed right next to her captain. Robin remembered that she had wrapped her arms around Luffy, but it seemed that they had changed places when they were sleeping. Robin sighed in contentment. She wasn't going to be able to wiggle out of Luffy's arms without waking him, nor did she want to. Looking out the window, Robin saw that it was later in the morning than it usually was when she woke up. Nevertheless, it would still be a few hours before Luffy got up himself. Robin closed her eyes, as snuggled closer to Luffy. Luffy responded by tightening his arms around her. SSSSSSSS. Nami woke up about an hour later. Yawning, she slipped out of her pajamas and into her normal clothes. She normally met Robin in the kitchen to get something to drink. Sanji was generally the next one to get up, followed by Usopp, Chopper, and Luffy, and Zoro woke up at about the same time. Frankie was still a bit of an unknown when it came to getting up. Walking into the kitchen, Nami looked around and couldn't find Robin. Thinking back, Nami remembered that Robin was most likely still attached to Luffy, and since the woman was quite infatuated with Luffy, so Nami figured she probably wouldn't be up for another hour or two. Sanji fluttered into the kitchen with hearts in his eyes. Nami Chuan, he stopped seeing that Robin wasn't there. Hey Nami, where's Robin? She's normally the first one up, Sanji said, looking around a bit more. Robin is sleeping in cause she was up last night finishing something up, Nami answered, not wanting Sanji to burst in on Robin and Luffy. Nami herself is actually quite like Sanji. If he ever wanted to be with her though, he'd have to learn not to swoon over other women. To Nami, Sanji had traits that she would want in a guy. He was strong, an amazing cook, and best of all he would do whatever she said. Sanji, Robin was acting a bit weird yesterday, wasn't she? Nami mentioned offhandedly. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think she's in love with that idiot captain of ours, he replied in a normal voice. Oh well, you're taking this a lot better than I thought you would, Nami said with a smile. Sanji sighed. Over the years I've learned when to leave a woman alone when it was too dangerous. Besides, I got most of it out of my system yesterday, he explained. Nami giggled. She vaguely remembered a stream of water appearing on the ship after they had left the kitchen. Does that mean all of your attention is going to be focused on me now? Nami asked. Tell you what, I'll go out with you if you can go 2 months without swooning over any girls, but me. Sanji's eyes immediately turned into hearts, and I'll know if you do, I'll have the rest of the crew keep an eye on you, Nami added with a glare. Sanji nodded quickly. This was a chance he couldn't pass up. This also happened to be the closest he's gotten to getting a girl. Ever since he left the Baradi, they've all been slightly freaked out by him. Nami smiled. If he couldn't keep himself from other women, then she figured she could do better. However, if he could, having a boyfriend that could do your bidding and was an amazing cook was definitely worth it. Yusuf walked into the kitchen. Hey Sanji, when will breakfast be ready? Sanji sighed. That was the question that was asked every day by Yusuf, Chopper, Luffy, and Zoro. I think I'll wait till everyone's up. Since Luffy is attached to Robin, she can probably keep him outside till everyone is done eating, then I can feed him separately, Sanji explained. Hey, that means we won't struggle for our food, Yusuf said, hitting his palm with his fist. Sanji shrugged. Hopefully Robin can keep him distracted enough, he replied. Eventually everyone started eating, including, since Luffy nor Robin had come out yet. Luffy walked in with Robin. Hey guys, he said, as he sat down. Thanks Robin. Everyone managed to finish eating since you kept Luffy out long enough, Nami said happily. You're welcome, although I didn't really mean to do anything. Hey Sanji, I'm hungry, Luffy complained. Sanji sighed. Luffy was still the same, always hungry. Here I set some food aside for both of you, Sanji told them, as he left the kitchen. Robin smiled, as they ate their breakfast. She didn't mind sharing the food with Luffy, since she certainly didn't have his appetite, but she did have to smack his hand away from what she was eating a few times. There was no changing Luffy, not that she wanted to. As the day went on, Luffy and Robin split up, Luffy going and playing with Chopper and Usopp, while Robin went off to start reading. As she read, Robin thought back to what Sol had told her. He promised she would find people that would accept her like the Straw Hats have. She felt a warm feeling grow inside of her, as she thought about how much more they, or more specifically Luffy, had given her. After putting her book away in a relatively safe place, Robin went over to play with Luffy, Chopper, and Usopp. They were all entertaining in their own ways, and they were all entertained by her powers. The day passed relatively quickly. Luffy and Robin had separated from the rest of the crew, and sat down together. Nami was making sure they were on track at the moment, while Sanji catered to her every whim. Usopp had started to work on his bullet recipes. Chopper was studying some of the new unusual medical techniques that he found in a book they picked up in a very small remote village. Frankie was still stuck in his workshop like he had been for the last few days, while he tried to sort out a problem with something he made. We're almost to land, Nami called out. In adventure, Luffy yelled, jumping out of Robin's arms. Robin smiled. She was a bit disappointed that her cuddle time with Luffy had ended, but his energy was quite infectious. Regardless, she'd be spending time with him. He would no doubt shorten the cuffs once they got onto land. After a few hours, Luffy sighed. The only things on the island were small animals and vegetation. According to Nami, the island was only about 2 miles wide, and was the biggest of the small set of islands that they had stopped at. Nami requested, or ordered, that they stay here for a day or two, since she wanted to map out all the details. Finally being convinced by Robin, he accepted. Luffy, Robin, Usopp, Frankie, and Chopper just played on the island for a few days, while Zoro trained and got in fights with Sanji. Of course, Robin did manage to pull Luffy away from the others long enough to sit, talk, and cuddle with him. He was definitely not as uncomfortable as the first time she had cuddled up close to him, but there was no keeping him still for more than a half an hour, which Nami called a miracle. Robin was a bit fidgety. For 2 years she had been separated from Luffy, and he was the last person that needed to show up. Calm down Robin, he'll be here soon. He probably just got into some trouble in town. Besides, Chopper said he'd pick them up, Nami told her. I know, but what if he's over me or Robin started before being cut off? Robin, honestly, you're reacting like a small schoolgirl. Besides, Luffy is the most loyal person any of us know. Robin sighed. She knew Nami was right, but the waiting was starting to grate on her. Robin just stayed here for a second, okay, Nami said, as she headed into the kitchen. Robin was starting to annoy her. All she was doing was pacing and thinking about Luffy, and it was annoying. Grabbing a bottle of liquor, Nami brought it back out and shoved it into Robin's arms. Nami, I'm not a very good drunk, Robin told her a bit nervously. Well, Robin didn't actually know that. She didn't really want to find out. Most of her life, getting drunk would have meant being vulnerable, which was something she went to great lengths to avoid. Nami groaned and snatched the bottle away from Robin. I would drink this myself, but someone needs to navigate once everyone gets here, she said annoyingly. Nami sighed as they waited for everyone else. Normally Robin would have been her company of choice, but she was a bundle of nerves at the moment. Thinking back on it, the only time she had seen Robin acting similarly to this was when they met at Kiji. Can't get drunk, can't get her drunk, this is stupid, Nami complained to herself. She could only hope that everyone would get to the boat soon. Although when she thought about it, she was still amused that Robin, the most knowledgeable person she knew, was in love with Luffy, possibly the most airheaded person she knew. Nami almost cried out in relief when she saw Chopper come into view. She would have been much happier to see everyone again if Robin hadn't been so annoying. Nami grinned, thinking of Robin being annoying because she was too emotional wasn't something that she would have thought of before. As the rest of the Straw Hat crew jumped off of the colorful bird, it was clear Luffy was about to yell something, but was interrupted by Robin tackling him to the ground. I miss you too, Robin, Luffy said, giggling, but let's catch up once we get out of here. I don't want to get held up here again. Robin nodded. Last time they got held up here they had been separated for about 2 years, and that wasn't something that she particularly liked. As they started to prepare, Marine ships started shooting on them. Before the ships could close in any farther, a pirate ship blocked their path. Isn't that the Kuja pirates? They're from Amazon Lily. The island is supposed to be composed of only women, Robin commented. Luffy grinned. Hey, Hancock's here. Come on, let's get going quickly. Robin's face paled a bit. That's where you were the last 2 years? She asked a bit nervously. She had taken the binoculars from Usopp and looked at the ship. Hancock was quite beautiful, and it made her a bit jealous. Yeah, Hancock helped me out a lot, and she kept saying she wanted to marry me, Luffy told Robin while laughing a bit. Everyone else facepalmed. It was quite obvious that Robin wasn't taking the news well. All anyone knew was that Luffy had trained while he was away, and that he was in close proximity to Boa Hancock. Seeing Robin's worried face, everyone else assumed that she was either jealous or worried that Luffy had decided to choose Hancock over her. Nami sighed again. She didn't need Robin to be anxious the entire time. So Luffy, what did you say? Well, no, of course, but she kept asking, even so I said I was with Robin. I think she thinks of Robin as a competitor. It's weird, Luffy replied, laughing. Seeing Robin had calmed down, Nami started instructing the crew on starting the ship. Once they got below the water, Robin walked over to Luffy. She was obviously not going to get the chance to cuddle with him, since he was quite excited about traveling under the sea, but it was nice to be around him again. After a few moments, Nami blinked. As she looked around, something seemed off. As her eyes settled on the person next to Zoro, she blinked a few more times. What are you doing here? Zoro looked towards the pink-haired girl next to him, and sighed. He still didn't know why she had to come along. I didn't feel like finding another boy toy, Perona replied. Zoro just groaned. Granted, she took care of his wounds, which he was grateful for, but she was still annoying. Whenever she thought that he was being ungrateful, she would use her ghosts and make him depressed. The rest of the crew couldn't say they liked Perona a whole lot, but ultimately the decision was up to Luffy, and everyone was pretty certain that the deciding factor was going to be the ghosts that she controlled. Okay, Luffy replied shortly. Zoro sighed. It's not that he didn't like her, but since he had been separated from the crew, she wouldn't stop pestering him. So Zoro, where's our room? Everyone giggled a bit after Perona asked the question, mostly due to Zoro's reaction, and partly due to the act that he was the only one without a room. Frankie stepped up to answer the question. Zoro doesn't have a room, he just kind of sleeps wherever he started before Perona cut in. Oh, so he does that here too, she commented, glaring at Zoro. Well, yes, but my point is Robin's old room is used mostly for us to store some random crap in, so you can use it once we clear it out, Frankie explained. After a second or so, a thought crossed Frankie's mind. If you guys want to share the room, I'll need to build another bed. I just don't have the materials for it at the moment. Perona blinked a few times while Zoro glanced away, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Soon enough, Robin started giggling, and Nami started to laugh. Hey Robin, what's going on? Luffy asked. Well, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, that Zoro has been sleeping with Perona for the last 1 to 2 years, Robin replied, still snickering a bit. Zoro was one of the last people she expected to be in a relationship like that. Yeah, and can you believe he didn't even consider asking me to come? Perona complained. It's not my place to invite others into the crew, Zoro replied gruffly. You could have asked Luffy. You just got here. I didn't have the chance, Zoro replied, grinding his teeth. Of course, all of this wasn't making him any happier that Perona was coming along. He had to admit he did like her, and the sex. And I'm not going to sleep with you until you properly apologize, Perona told Zoro. Zoro just stomped away, leaving the rest of the Straw Hats amused. Anyways, Perona, do you mind if we wait till we dock till we clear out your room? Nami asked. I'll need these idiots in case something comes up. Everyone has told us this route is pretty dangerous. Of course, there are supposed to be plenty of things down here that could sink this ship in a heartbeat, if no one's there to stop it, Perona replied cheerily. The response caused Chopper, Usopp, and Nami to cry in a corner, while Luffy's eyes got that look that meant there was no turning back for anyone anymore. Robin just giggled at Luffy's excitement, as it was quite infectious, or at least it was to her. After everyone had settled down, Sanji went to Nami and explained his condition. After hearing the entire story, Nami agreed that she would give him a bit of leeway if he swooned over a few girls. Spending 2 years on an island full of would do that to pretty much anyone. Of course, she also agreed to help him, as best she could, which only made Sanji drool and start to swoon. Nami sighed, as she climbed onto the sunny. As she headed towards her orchard, she noticed Robin walking out of the cabin area. Oh, hey Robin. What are you doing? Robin stopped, a bit startled. Oh, I didn't realize you were there, Nami. I'm just getting some fresh air. What are you doing here? You know, the same as you. I just wanted to check up on my tangerines, Nami replied, patting one of the trees. Robin gave a small smile, and nodded a bit. Taking a bit of a closer look at Robin, Nami noticed her hair and clothes were disheveled. You and Luffy were having sex. No wonder I didn't notice Luffy near the end of the party, Nami asked, leaning on the railing. Robin's cheeks turned bright red. So come on Robin, tell me how it was, you always brush me off when I ask. Well to be honest today was my first time, Robin replied, looking extremely embarrassed. After a second or two of working out what Robin said, Nami's eyes whitened. You were a virgin, and you two hadn't slept together before? She asked, a bit bewildered. Both me and Luffy were comfortable before, but after seeing him again Robin said, finishing with a shrug. Wow, I would have thought you'd have slept with someone before, Nami said, as she thought about Robin's life. Robin had a nice body, and could probably get around. Well, the thing is I know that would have gotten me some places, but I was paranoid. I was too worried that someone would betray me, and having sex would make me vulnerable, so I avoided it. Robin replied, having calmed herself enough to stop all the stuttering. I didn't know you thought me and Luffy were sleeping together the whole time, she added in a softer voice. I've asked you before, and you shrugged me off, Nami complained. You asked me how I like being with Luffy, not if we had sex. Well, that was heavily implied. Well, I must have missed the implication, but today was definitely the first time, Robin said firmly. I just needed to get some air, and Luffy needed to rest a bit, she added, as she headed back inside. Nami gave a small grin. She could only assume Robin and Luffy weren't finished. Luffy was almost certainly still hurt. She wasn't even sure how he didn't burst open when he ate all that food. Nami sighed. She needed to find Sanji now. However lecherous he might act towards mermaids here, he was still loyal. Zoro sighed. He didn't particularly like apologizing, especially to Nami or Perona. He disliked apologizing to Nami because she was a greedy bitch whenever money was involved, though she seemed to be okay when it wasn't about money. He disliked apologizing to Perona because, well, he honestly didn't know. Swallowing his pride, Zoro knocked on the door. Hey sweetie, he called out. After saying it, he quickly looked around to make sure no one was listening. No one on the crew, perhaps apart from Chopper, would let him forget about it. For some reason, unknown to Zoro, Perona liked to have him call her princess, sweetie, and a few other nicknames like that. Zoro, however, found it humiliating, especially when he was scolded by Perona in front of Hawkeyes for not using one of the nicknames. The door opened. The room was dark and a bit gothic. This didn't particularly bother Zoro, partly because he had become accustomed to it, and partly because he didn't care where he slept. Perona just looked at Zoro expectantly, as they both stood there. I'm sorry for not treating you well enough, as my girlfriend, and after you helped heal my wounds, and showed me where I needed to go to meet up with Luffy and the others, Zoro said in a tone that wasn't all that apologetic. That was pathetic. You didn't even sound sorry, Perona said, glaring at Zoro. But I know how hard it is for you to act civilly, and that's probably the best I'm going to get, so come on, she told him, pulling him into the room. The Straw Hats were living legends. After much blood, sweat, and tears they had conquered the Grand Line. Zoro had finally achieved his dreams and beaten the Hawkeyes, but just barely. This of course led to him deciding he needed to increase his training regime. Hawkeyes declined Zoro's later challenges, declaring there was no point since Zoro had long since exceeded him. Perona had tamed Zoro a bit, and they were getting along quite well. Both of them actually seemed to show a lot more open affection to each other, and didn't mind letting everyone see. The rest of the crew still found this Zoro bizarre, since they had dealt with the aloof, agitated Zoro that slept all day. Zoro did occasionally go back to his hometown with Perona. She pretty much had to go with him since he still had the worst possible sense of direction. If the Marines found him at the dojo, he generally made a bit of a game of it, which amused everyone. The Marines treated this more like training since they knew they didn't have a chance in hell of catching him, and it was entertainment for the students of his former master. Usopp had become at least on par with his father. His draw wasn't quite as quick, but he had better aim, and could fire faster. He also had the advantage of being more versatile with all the different types of ammo he had. Usopp and his father had gone through several competitions. Usopp came ahead by 1 point. They didn't bother firing on each other, since neither wanted to hurt the other, so everyone agreed if their hearts weren't in it, it was pointless. Usopp and Kaya alternated between Syrup Village and the Sunny every month. Kaya assisted Chopper whenever he needed help, but mostly it was him teaching her. Usopp and Kaya had finally gotten together, and got married with Luffy during the ceremony. The only thing that kept Luffy from ruining the ceremony was Robin, who made sure he didn't mess everything up. Sanji had taken a boat from some pirates who attacked them. After finding the All Blue, he converted the boat into a small restaurant. It wasn't as spacious as the Bereti, but it had enough space for the amount of people that could make it that far in the Grand Line, and the occasional ship they passed while in one of the other 4 seas. The boat was towed by the Sunny, and it kept much of the cooking supplies. While the kitchen on the Sunny was amazing, Frankie had transformed the boat from a standard ship into a chef's dream. There weren't a whole lot of customers, but it was somewhere that they could host dinner for guests or people who had been stranded at sea. Of course Sanji had stayed with Nami, and even married her. Nami was still working on her map of the world. Having been working solely on the mapping, and being with Sanji, her obsession with money had died down a bit. She still hoarded, but she wasn't one to charge 300% interest anymore. Nami was often the one deciding their destination now since she was working on the map. Chopper was still doing what he did on the ship. To his horror, the Foxy Pirates had disbanded. The Straw Hats had run into Porsche at an island that they stopped at while they were sailing. She begged to come with them solely for the reason of wanting to cuddle with Chopper. Everyone else found this amusing, and agreed that she would be good for Chopper. She eventually became Chopper's full-time assistant, and started learning from both him and Kaya. Frankie based himself back in Water 7. He still came with the Straw Hats if they requested it, but there was a lot more he could do off the ship. The ship hardly ever needed repairs anymore, so he only found himself on the Sunny about a third of the time. He did enjoy being back with his people where he was able to build various things like ships or weapons. Brooke stayed on the ship almost full-time. However, if they were docked for a while, he would set up a show as the Soul King. He requested to visit Laboon every once in a while. But for the most part, Brooke's life remained relatively unchanged in the time he had been with the Straw Hats. Luffy had done everything he had set out to do. Shanks told him to keep the hat, which he did. He had become the Pirate King, although he still acknowledged Gold D. Rogers as the Eternal Pirate King. He still went on small adventures, but nothing was quite as challenging as it was before. He often had his crew sail towards his home village. He had paid Makino, and everyone else he had told he would pay in treasure, much to their amusement. But what really made his life worth living now was Robin. They had been together since Eni's lobby, and she was the world to him. Robin had actually proposed to Luffy, but he said no. His reasoning was that the Pirate King shouldn't be married. Robin didn't mind much, she actually found it a bit amusing, but she promised him she would get a ring on his finger someday. Luffy knew she would eventually trick him into it, she was just too smart and sneaky for him. The Straw Hats were legendary. The feats of every crew member were known to everyone. Their bounties no longer existed. The government all but declared that if any of the Straw Hats were captured, the person who captured them could demand almost anything they wanted. Chopper had the same thing going for him, but he was still declared as a pet, much to his annoyance. This was all Luffy had ever wanted, and everyone knew that he would sail until he dropped dead. The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.